This Appgate SDP demo topic is claims and the policy engine. This is a fun topic. If you remember from previous demos, the claims engine is a very powerful part of the Appgate environment. Let's go all the way to the very beginning of how claims are created and where they originate from, and then I'll show you how we use them in the system. So here I am in my Appgate console, being served from one of my controllers. And if I navigate to identity and identity providers, I'm going to pick on one particular identity provider. They're all relatively the same, but the capabilities are the same. But let's just dive into my SDP demo Active Directory. So this is the identity provider settings for an AD server. If a user chooses this particular identity provider, they're going to provide credentials to the Appgate client that will then be validated against the Active Directory server that the controller has the ability to talk to. If I scroll down, you can see I can use DNS servers to resolve the DNS names of those Active Directory servers. In fact, here is the DNS name of my particular AD server. You might want to put multiples in here. I can serve it up on a secure port. I'm going to use a service account to do that. Again, these are the basic configurations of how to get Appgate to talk to an LDAP service or Active Directory in this case. But how do the claims come into play? So within Active Directory, there are attributes associated with every user. A lot of the attributes are standard, but you can make custom attributes as well. For example, a standard attribute is the member of field within AD. The member of field is effectively an array of groups that the user belongs to. Well, in this section of the configuration panel, I have told Appgate that whenever a user authenticates and it gets back all of the elements of information about that user, take the member of field and map it to an array called groups. So I'm going to store the member of field in a variable that I'm calling groups inside of Appgate. Likewise, I'm grabbing the department field coming back from Active Directory and storing it in the department claim as well, the department variable inside of Appgate. And you can see the other mappings I've made here too. Obviously a very customized one, physical delivery office name. I'm mapping it to something called home IP, right? And so there's all kinds of different ways that you can think of this. But the point here is that these are all variables that are now available to the policy engine. But that's just information about the user. That's information that the identity management system knows about the human that's authenticated to the Appgate client. If I scroll a little bit further down, you'll see there's a whole nother section here called on-demand device claims. These are device claims that once the user is authenticated, the Appgate controller will then tell the Appgate client to execute all of these other claims. So for example, let's dive into the very first one. Run a device claim script and store the output in this variable on all Windows devices. So that device claim script is going to actually execute on the end user device and pull back any output from that script and save it on in that particular variable called Win McAfee AV status, right? That's a fairly complex one. Whoops, that's a fairly complex one that you can see. But there's simpler ones as well, right? So here's another one. I can look and see if there's a running process called Agent D, and I'm going to store it in a SolarWinds agent claim name on all macOS devices. Well, this happens to be the name of the process that represents SolarWinds running on a user's device. That might be a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not judging here, but I can determine whether or not it's running. Again, I can use these types of queries. Here's an Apple TV violation, right? So I'm looking for a process running called TV. Imagine a PS-EF grep TV and store a true or false in the Apple TV violation variable or claim and do that on all platforms, right? So let's dive into some of the details here as if I were creating a new one. So the options that I have, I can look at a file size, I can look at the existence of a file, I can look at create stamp, update stamp, the SHA 512 value of the file, right? So I can compare that to a known good value. I can do a search for an existing running process in the process table itself. Now this is one that we're deprecating. This gives you the list of everything that's running on the system. Interesting reason why it's being deprecated, but you can really shoot yourself in the foot with this one. But it was there as an option. Again, we don't tend to deprecate things immediately. We will give our customers warnings that things are going to go away so they can figure out a different way to achieve what they're trying to do. And so that's what that particular thing means. And then, of course, run device claim script. This is the idea that I can write a script that can be executed on the end user's device when they log in and throughout their session and pull back data that the script would return. And then for Windows only, I have some other options as well. Remember, Windows has a registry, so I can query the registry. I can look and see if a value exists in the registry. I can look in the services, right? Windows also has a services concept, so I can look and see if it's actually running or if it's in the list. And then I can actually look at a file version. The Windows file system, ADFS, includes versioning concepts as well. So these are all the different capabilities of the on-demand device claims. So if we think about that, now I've got information through the identity management system about the user in the form of user claims, right? That was this first thing here. And I've got information about the device associated with that identity management system that come in through on-demand device claims. Now what? What do I do with these things? Well, let's go back to the home screen, take a look at active sessions, and let's look at my connection. And if you watched one of my other demos where I talked about this details page, I'm going to skip all the other stuff at the top, but I'm going to go right down to the claims section. And here I can see, let's skip systems claims. We'll get back to it in a second. Here's my user claims. So within user claims, I've got all these different variables that are actually populated because I authenticated against Active Directory. So remember that home IP claim? There is my home IP address. So now I have a value of 76.232.122.24. This represents the default gateway for my home network. And I have that stored in AD, right? Well, there's another section of claims called system claims that the Appgate system captures on its own. You don't configure it, you don't tell it to do it, it just does it on its own. One of those claim names is client source IP. So the Appgate client will actually go look at the network settings on the device to determine what is your default gateway. And that comes back as 76.232.122.24. This is my presence on the public internet. Again, same IP as you see down here. Now I've got the ability to compare this value to determine whether or not the user is actually working from home. So I can then use these values in different ways to define policies that the user might qualify for. If you're working from an office, I might give you access to certain apps. If you're working from home, I might limit your access a little bit. If your current source IP and your home IP are no match and it's not a source IP that I recognize in any way, then I know you're in some public place, then I'm really going to limit what you have access to. So there's ways that you can use and manipulate these different elements of data to determine things. Another interesting thing with system claims is that we take that public IP address associated with your internet connection and we do the lookup against MaxMinds to figure out where is it? What are the geo coordinates of that IP address? So I can see this particular user is in the US, in Canada, or in California, North America, and here's his latitude and his longitude as well if I wanted to do some calculations with that data to determine, the Superman effect. The last time you logged in was 10 minutes ago, but you're now on the other side of the planet. That doesn't seem legit. So there's ways that you can check that as well. Okay, so diving a little deeper, all my user claims, remember my Apple TV violation, there it is, and I'm not running it, so it came back as false. So I could now create a policy. As long as Jim's not running Apple TV, I want to grant him access to a particular application. Or I can factor it into a longer list of claims that says, hey, if you're a member of a certain group, you're working from your home office, your antivirus is running, and you're not running SolarWinds, and you're not running TV, then I'm going to grant you access to stuff. So that's how that shows up. So now that I've got these claims, we understand kind of where they're stored. Every user gets their own set of claims. I can now use these claims to define policies. So let's take a look at a simple policy. So here's a simple policy where a user claim.department is finance, and all of the below are true. So if I'm a member of the finance team, then I'm going to be granted access to the all containers entitlement as well as any entitlement tagged finance. And that's how I match users to their claims, to a policy, to the entitlements. It's relatively simple once you get your head around it, but extremely powerful because I can mix and match different items. I also have the ability to change this to a big or statement. So I can put multiple things in there and say, if you're a member of finance or a member of IT admin, then I'll give you access to these things. I could do stuff like that. I can change it to be custom logic. So imagine if I've got an assignment number 1 and number 2 and number 3 and number 4, that I can say if 1 and 2 are true or 3 is true, things like that are possible as well. And then finally, I can also convert it to a JavaScript and write some JavaScript logic. I can, apply my own JavaScript thinking to it and work it out from a JavaScript perspective. So I've got the ability to do that as well. And I started all of that conversation with the very simplest of claims, but let's dig in and go a little bit deeper. So here's a more complex one that's actually looking for compliance to a BYOD policy. So again, this policy is applied or evaluated every time a user logs in and every 5 minutes thereafter. As the user is connected, the Appgate client is constantly ensuring that he still meets those policies that he qualified for at login time by continuously checking on all these claims to making sure that they're still valid. And so in this particular case, I'm looking, it says if 1 and 4, and so 1 is OS name starts with Microsoft, and 4, he has the WannaCry patch, or 2, Apple, right? So the WannaCry patch doesn't apply to Apple. So 1 and 4 or 2, and you always have to have 3, and you always have to have 5. So 3 is the SolarWinds agent is true in this case, and you have to be in the country of the US, right? So in that scenario, what this is basically saying, if you're running Microsoft with the WannaCry patch on it, or you're running an Apple operating system, and you have the SolarWinds agent and you're in the US, then we're going to give you access to these particular entitlements, right? In this case, it was entitlements by name, this single destination, whatever that is. There's a lot of other options in here where we can do backups and we can do tags and we can override sites with other claims and things like that, more advanced use cases. But that's fundamentally what the claims system is and how it ties into the policy system in Appgate.